Is Indiana overrated? Nebraska's schedule has also been filled with some poor teams. Nebraska is 5-1. Indiana is 6-0. Their schedules are very similar. The big difference right now, in my opinion, is that they played a team in Western Illinois that is just, that they beat 77-3. That is a really, 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 really bad football team.
Yes.
Nebraska beat Northern Iowa. So, the equivalent team, Nebraska's was much worse than Indiana's was. But it's not like UTEP is any good. They're 131st, according to K Ford. Purdue, we know how horrible they are. Rutgers took a massive step back, given what happened with them versus Wisconsin over the weekend. So their version of UTEP is FIU. UTEP is ranked lower. UCLA, I guess that would be either UCLA or Northwestern is Nebraska's version of Purdue. They also did get Charlotte, who is another bad football team, and then they had Maryland coming to town. What do the averages?
Nebraska's average, and this is just the 5 opponents that are FBS.
That is where they get weighted down. Is Western Illinois in a lot of the numbers is just horrible.
Yes,
so they lower it even that much more.
Right, but we're just counting the
5.
The group. The FBS schools because K Ford doesn't rate the FCS schools.
Okay,
Nebraska's average ranked team in K Ford's power rankings is 76th. Indiana's is 85th.
See, so it's not that
It's not
much.
a huge difference.
Scott, Nick, you can help us out with this one because Scott says, I see we're glazing the opponent again. What is glazing? Is that good or bad?
I don't know.
I looked up glazing and it looked like it was for window installation. So I don't know what the action of installing windows. John, are we installing windows?
Maybe it's like,
is it a donut thing?
I can't tell if it's a positive or a negative. I don't know. If
I'm guessing it's a negative that we're talking up.
Wait, so
Indiana.
So
we're talking
glazing is when you talk somebody up?
I'm assuming.
Okay.
Scott,
help us out.
Please, we don't speak your language.
Yeah. Scott says Illinois, Colorado, Rutgers better than any of Indiana's opponents. Okay, so he is saying that we are being too positive. We're hyping them up, as Peter says. Okay, real quick. Colorado, Illinois, Rutgers better than anyone that they have played. I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that Nebraska has played. Colorado right now is the best opponent that either of these two teams has played. Now, I would say that the version of Colorado today is better than the version that Nebraska got, but that's neither here nor there.
I agree.
So they are the best team. Rutgers is probably the second best team on the schedule, but part of that is that Maryland is bad, and Northwestern is bad, and UCLA is
keep
bad.
in mind, and one of the reasons why this conversation is a little hard to have, look at what happened to Rutgers.
Yeah, for sure.
Rutgers just got boat raced at home.
Yeah.
By Wisconsin, who before that was like, eh.
Yeah.
So it's hard sometimes to just sit here and make these blanket statements. Well, they haven't played anybody yet. Yeah. When you look across college football and from one week to the next, Alabama goes literally in one half from being the greatest thing on earth
to horrible
to being bad in a game and a half.
Their defense,
2.5 games.
Yeah, their defense in the last 10 quarters is among the worst in the entire country.
And Scott says, glazing is overly complimenting someone. I'm not overly complimenting them. I am just quoting numbers.
That's all we're doing.
I am quoting numbers.
So here's
the point is this. Nebraska also hasn't really played a world-beating schedule. There's a lot of questions about both of these teams that I look very forward to seeing answered
100%
this week. I believe these two teams are in the same weight class.
Yes, just one team is at home and the other is not. And I would say
one team has probably been a little more flashy in defeating their opponent.
That is when I look at Indiana, and I've watched Indiana this year, and look, I do think that there is a lot of helmet watching in this discussion.
Oh, big time.
If I'm trying to think of not like an Ohio State or Oregon type team, but like if Wisconsin was doing what Indiana is doing, they would not be ranked as low as they are. And I do not think that people around here would be like, oh, they suck. Because now part of that too is the history of Wisconsin owning Nebraska, and that Indiana is a basketball school. But you just hit on the thing for me with Indiana. If we agree that the schedules are fairly comparable, and that Nebraska has maybe the top two toughest teams on it, you have to be impressed by Indiana taking care of business. That's what I am. Sure. I listen to people around here nitpick Nebraska every day this season for not doing this, not finishing drives, not winning by more points, penalties, all of these things. Mm-hmm. And so then they're like, yeah, but Indiana hasn't beaten anybody. Okay, fine, but they're kicking the crap out of the teams that they are playing.
Right.
They're winning, so they're covering.
Yeah, they're getting the style points that you want Nebraska to have.
Exactly. So you can't get mad at your program for not getting the style points and then not be impressed by the team that is getting the style points. And that's what impresses me about Indiana is that, look, they're not making the playoff. I'm not going to buy into Indiana in year one of a new coaching regime. No offense, but like with a bunch of James Madison players. No. Now, is their schedule fairly manageable? Yes. As a listener just pointed out in the text machine, Jeff, is that right? Indiana only has 4 road games all year? Indeed. And they've already played 2 of them. They got 4 home games still to come in the back half. Meanwhile, Nebraska only has 2 home games in the back half of their schedule. Mm-hmm. Think about that. So Indiana has an incredibly manageable schedule. But I mean,
right now, if K Ford is right,
I know they're going to be in the playoff.
If K Ford is right, they're in the playoff conversation heavily. They're projected for 10-2.
I just think so. Part of it for me is college football has been weird. It's always weird, but this year has been very, very strange, and expecting teams to win all the games that they're supposed to, I think is a fool's errand, because it just doesn't happen very often. And especially now with a little bit more wiggle room, with the 12-team playoff. I don't expect them to, I'd probably have them going 10-2 right now, but 9-3 wouldn't surprise me. But look, is there a world where Saturday morning Nebraska comes and punches them in the mouth because they haven't seen a defensive line like Nebraska's? Of course there is. Absolutely there is. And we're like, well, and basically all the people that have been in our mention saying you guys are glazing them.
But okay, here's where I caution everybody to be careful here. Yesterday I announced it on the Grum. We are in an overreaction watch.
Yeah.
Big Red overreaction immediately following the game this Saturday on 1620 The Zone and 101.9 The Keg. But that overreaction watch is when Nebraska wins and people will overreact by saying, well, see, told you Indiana wasn't that good.
Yeah.
Or they'll overreact if Nebraska loses to, oh, my God, the sky is falling. We're a terrible program, because already looking at Indiana and deeming them to be overrated or deeming to be lesser than they are. I mean, you're really affecting yourself.
Yeah, don't do that.
Can't we sit back? I mean, of course we can question. And I have questioned who they have played. But you can only do what you can do against the teams you have played. And so far, Indiana has put up the style points. Someone brought up earlier, 2-card Monty on the comment section. A 14-point win over Maryland is kicking the crap out of teams. Yeah, that's their closest game this year.
And they're up by 3 scores with 4 minutes to go, by the way.
And I think they turned the ball over.
That's the thing.
3 or 4 times in that game?
That game, they played with their food more than they have in any game this year, and they still won by 2 scores. And again, they were up 42-21 with 4 minutes to go in that game.
Right.
I thought that the game control throughout that was magnificent from them. Zach emails in, Equitable Bank inbox. Nebraska could have gotten style points if they would have tried to run up the score in non-conference games instead of trying to play 100 players. I disagree. The first game, for sure, they kicked the crap out of UTEP. I'm not going to whine about that. The second game versus Colorado, say what you will about how good or bad the refs were, but they had a million penalties. And Nebraska tried to run up the score, and they were just unable to. The next game, their defense was on the field a whole lot. And fine, even if I would acquiesce and say Nebraska could have run up the score. All right, so what happened in the other 3 games then? What happened against Illinois? What happened against Purdue? What happened against Rutgers? They didn't have the chance to run up the score in any of those games. They had 0 points at the end of the first half versus Purdue.
0 points.
And look, and people are pointing out about the Northwestern game. Max says Indiana did get a late touchdown against Northwestern. Not saying that it doesn't count or anything, but they didn't boat race either Northwestern or Maryland. And that is true. They looked the most
vulnerable.
Yes, thank you. That's the best word for it. In the last 2 weeks, as the competition finally went from dog doo-doo to what it was. And yet, I'm still impressed that they are winning all these games by double digits. But I have been impressed by them since the UCLA game. I watched that game. I came away very impressed because they dominated. They did not play with their food.
And there are good players on UCLA. It might not be a great football team, but they don't have chuds on that team.
Yeah. Max says
there are good athletes on that team.
Do you guys think Nebraska's best is better than Indiana's best, i.e. first half versus Colorado-esque? Probably, but and that's the thing. We have only seen that version of Nebraska for It's the 2 quarters there, and then depending on what you want to do versus UTEP, only a handful of quarters. We at the very most, I would say we've seen that version of Nebraska for 5 quarters, and we haven't seen it in a month. And the special teams is worse now. And
yes, it is.
All of that.
We've been talking all this offense and defense stuff. We haven't even brushed special teams.
Yeah.
And listen, I don't care who you think Indiana hasn't played yet. Nebraska's special teams are terrible.
Yeah.
And that could end up being the difference in this game.
Yeah. Do you think it's a 1-score game? Do you think it goes down to the wire? Okay. If you say yes to either of those questions, and then you're like, yeah. And so I feel really good because I know special teams won't be the answer for you there. The thing that I want to see coming out of the idle week, is the offense for Nebraska, and can they fix themselves like the defense has from their low point? The Nebraska defense low point so far this year came against Illinois in that second half in the 2 plays in overtime. Horrible performance. Had a lot of us questioning how good the defense could be. They've answered the bell in the 8 quarters since. So I really don't have any questions for them.
Right.
I think it'll be tough versus Ohio State. And I think it's going to be hard on Saturday. Can the offense do the same? Because the offense coming out of the Illinois game, I felt really good about it. All right, the running game is still a concern, but you got to love the quarterback. He can make all the throws. The wide receivers were good in that game, good enough. You want to see more from the tight ends, yada, yada, yada. The first half against Purdue, they moved the ball, but they couldn't finish. And then the last game, was really bad. Now, how much of it was weather? Matt Rule brought up the weather again yesterday. I think it played a large part in it. Sure. But can the offense, like the defense, come out of their stinky performance and start playing better? If they're able to do that, man, of course, I think that they could win this game. And they can win a lot of games. And they can get to 8. They could get to 9. But if not, if the offense now is like this new version of them, which is the last 2 weeks, it's going to be tough.
So your answer to our poll question, to what degree do you believe that Indiana football this season is overrated? Your responses, we'll round up here. 47% say slightly overrated. 38% say not overrated. 10% say very overrated. And 6% say that Indiana is actually underrated. So if you compare, the very and the slightly are about 57% of the populace that responded to our survey. So
not surprised.
Honestly, I thought based on the tenor of the conversation, and again, a lot of times, the loudest folks will speak. Based on the tenor of the conversation yesterday and some of the conversation afterwards, I thought that we would get a lot more people saying that they're very overrated.
Yeah.
But again, I think one of the things that's getting in the way, because you brought it up earlier, if this were Wisconsin, people would not be talking like this right now. There is a lot of window shopping that's going on here because it's Indiana and they've never been great at football.
Yeah, it's unfair to say if this was Ohio State and they were doing this, of course, Ohio State has earned the benefit of the doubt and then some. But yeah, if you go with teams in that Wisconsin, Iowa, hell, dare I say even Northwestern, given that they've gone to the conference championship game a few times. If you go to that weight class, I think that the discussion would be a little bit different. But Indiana's a basketball school, This isn't what Indiana does. And look, here's a reason why I doubted them before the year, and that is I think that it is hard to plug and play to the degree that they did with players from a lower level. I think that is very difficult, and eventually it is going to catch up with them. Does that catching up begin on Saturday? It certainly could, Having that that many players come up from the James Madison level to compete at this level, I think is hard. On the other hand, as I just continue to ping pong back and forth and argue, Sig said it. Google me. Look at his record. There are coaches who win at every level of football. And this is what he does. He wins at every level of football. And I always am impressed by those types of coaches. It's not the hotshot coordinators. No, it's the ones who can win it. Where did Leipold win? Whitewater? Wisconsin Whitewater? I know he's having a bad season, but those are the guys that really impress me because it's it's portable. When you can do it at that level to then the G5 level to then a low-level power conference school, I think that you can continue to win at a high level.
Jed puts it very, very succinctly. If you can't compliment a team for being 6-0, then we can't be overly excited for beating that same 6-0 ranked team.
I don't understand this.
So don't cut yourself out at the knees. This would be
huge.
This would be a big win for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
A lot of different reasons. Imagine the momentum this will carry. Because remember, Nebraska is on Big Noon 2 weeks in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Not Ohio State, not Michigan. Nebraska is on Big Noon 2 weeks in a row. Imagine if they go into Bloomington, win this game. Is everybody around here who's been saying, oh, it's only Indiana, they're not that good, stop talking up Indiana, are you going to change your tune and then be all like, look at us, yay, and going into Ohio State?
They'll probably move the goalposts again because they just want to be miserable.
Well, probably.
And they lose to Ohio State. See, I told you. They were 6-2. Nobody wants to be happy. Everyone wants to be mad.
People hate being happy.
They do. They're bad at it.
I mean,
as a society, we're bad at being happy.
Well, if you're happy, you can't complain.
Of all the games, and I'm not just Colorado, I'll set off to the side because that was just a unique circumstance.
Yeah.
But of all the games on the schedule, this one excites me most because the matchup looks really intriguing. The questions behind the teams are intriguing. The timing of the game with both teams at midseason coming off idle weeks is intriguing.
Hell yeah.
And then what it potentially means for both sides, win or lose, moving into the latter half of the season. For Indiana, the playoff talk goes from wherever it is now up tenfold if they win this week, because more people will be in on them if they.
This will be their biggest game of the season in terms of eyeballs and people paying attention.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
By far.
And if Nebraska wins, it's going to be a hell of a momentum going into Ohio State. And it at least allows you and allows Matt Rule to tell his players, see, look at everything we have in front of us now. It's all doable from here.
And then
it's all doable from here.
Max points out they get the ranked win off their backs. If you beat Indiana outside of Ohio State, you say there is no team we can't beat. And
Absolutely.
they're not going to say that in the walls, but outside the walls, you can say and see that's where. But maybe people disagree with me because they don't think Indiana is very good. But I think if Nebraska can go into Bloomington and they can win this game, there's no reason to think that they couldn't do the same against USC, that they couldn't do the same against Wisconsin, and they couldn't do the same against Iowa.
Yep.
If they can win this one, they can win any game not named Ohio State on the schedule moving forward.
Agreed.
Will they? No. Can they? Yes. And that would be massive.
And what would that mean? 10-2.
And again, what does Matt Rule want? Relevance, playoff conversation.
You're in the conversation.
At the very least.
You're in the conversation. So don't denigrate this week and what it can mean for this program just because you don't like hearing about this other program.